afternoon. When I look into the audience, I see that a lot of you already finished their school career with success, I suppose. But are you aware what were the real factors for your success in education? As Dirk explained it, headmaster of a school for young adults, I am deeply concerned with learning success, and I deeply and profoundly believe that by changing the learning cultures in our school, we can make learning success and academic progress available for nearly everyone. But how can schools change their learning culture in order to support their students and to foster learning capacities? To explain this, I will rely on elements that were discovered many, many years ago by the Greek philosopher Aristoteles in his essay Rhetoric as the Art of Persuasion, where he identified three essential elements which are famously known, and we will certainly see them at some time. They are known as Ethos, Pathos, and Logos. These elements are mostly used in communication theory, but what I will do, I will take these elements and I will transpose them into an educational system in order to show the relevant changes for learning culture. So let's start with the first one, ethos. Ethos is related to credibility, in education, teacher credibility. The educational researcher John Hattie, in his book Visible Learning, has found out that teacher credibility is the fourth strongest influence on learning out of 150, and amongst the teacher-related elements, it even comes out first. So how can teacher establish credibility? In fact, there are not that many studies about it, but all conclude that teacher credibility is closely related to three essential qualities: professional competence, trustworthiness, and goodwill. Professional competence means essentially the mastering of subject knowledge and the didactical ability to translate it into learning situations. Secondly, the students must be able to trust their teacher when it comes to learning situations, but all in their personal relations. And third, the teachers need to show goodwill, especially when dealing with errors, because errors are an essential element in the learning path of the student. So we see that teacher credibility is a two-sided notion. On one side, you have a professional dimension, and on the other side, you have a more moral connotation, which is linked to trust and goodwill. The second element, pathos. Pathos comes from the Greek heart or feelings. In education, we should call it empathy. Empathy, in opposition to sympathy, is the ability of a person to put herself in another one's shoes without becoming confused with them. And as soon as schools start to develop situations in which the teacher, but also the students, can see themselves as a possible version of the other one, then they can start to work together on a common goal. One possible way for this would be installing tutoring in our schools. Tutoring means that every teacher in the school community is responsible for a small number of students which he sees on a regular basis every week individually. And in this trusted environment where the teacher and the student meet at the same eye level, they can talk, they can discuss, they can identify problems and work on solutions. Schools could even extend this cooperation by installing student tutoring, where the younger students are tutored by the older ones. Studies show that these student tutoring even has a very nice side effect. It lowers the numbers of conflicts between the students, because during the tutoring, students are used to and are more eager to speak up when it comes to telling about differences. Of course, not all conflicts could be avoided this way, but even in situations where students could get along, there is still the possibility of the adult tutor to step in order to sort things out. When I look now at ethos as credibility, pathos as empathy, what does logos stand for? In communication theory, logos stands for logic or decisions that make sense. Now, if a school wants to establish credibility, if a school wants to foster cooperation amongst at-risk students, the organization of the school has to be such that it supports these goals. So here logos relates to coherence or consistency. This would mean for schools that they would no longer be seen as a loose collection of individuals that teach a certain number of subjects, but it would be a community that shares a common goal, that has a shared vision, obviously, on teaching and learning. So this establishment of an organization could be seen very difficult by some of my fellow headmaster colleagues, because they are in schools that have way over 100, even 200 teachers, and they would wonder, how the heck should I do this? In these situations, the notion of small pedagogical team becomes a driving force for the change, because we would no longer see schools as a huge anonymous body, but we would subdivide the schools into small pedagogical teams with a limited number of teachers addressing a limited number of classes, which will work together every week and addressing two main focuses. The first focus would be the monitoring of the students' progress. The monitoring based on the feedback of the teachers, the feedback of the tutors, and the development of remedial situations when they identify problems, both academic or personal. The second element will be the development of learning situations which fosters the students' strengths and not only focus on their weaknesses or failures. These learning situations will also be coherent to the claim of the Canadian psychologist Albert Bandura, who says that schools should develop more and more the students' feelings for self-efficacy. Or, just to put it another way around, schools should tell more often the students that they are capable of, instead of only telling them that they are not capable of. And these learning situations should also help to develop the self-esteem of the students, their self-reflection, and develop a sense of responsibility and participation in their own educational project. So now, when I look at this kind of pedagogical triangle, ethos, pathos, logos, or we say credibility, empathy, and coherence, these elements cover a lot of learning culture in our schools, but they do not address everything. So I would like to add two other elements, which I call Telos and Kairos. They are Greek too. So Telos relates to the notion of purpose or end goal. For instance, in our school, we welcome a lot of young adults who come to our school looking for a second chance in education. And the first thing that we do when they come to our school, then we sit down with them at the table, but physically. We sit down and we try to identify a goal, a project that they will work on during the school year. This could be identifying a degree that they need for entering the job market or obtaining a diploma to continue their studies at a much higher level. This identification of a goal is also very important for the restoring of the desire for learning, which most of them lost. Desire in psychology is defined by the identification of an absence. Love is the longing for the loved one, hunger, the need for food, and motivation comes from the identification of a project, a goal that I will work on. And this identification of a goal will, in our conception, take place during the tutoring. This is very important because this identification of a goal is a very, very delicate process, because it requires to adjust or to adapt the learner's ambition to his or her potential. And this could be quite tedious in some situations. But once the student has defined, with the help of his tutors evidently, has defined his goal and his way of achieving it, this is a major asset for learning culture and learning success. Last but not least, Kairos comes from the Greek opportunity or right time. We all know, we from big experience, that early school leavers who have left school without obtaining a diploma, they were, at the moment where they left, it wasn't for them the right time, not the right curriculum. And when they come back to school, it's the kind of moral obligation of the school to raise their chances for success. One possible way of doing so would be the analysis of the learner's biography, looking together with him at his past, what his ambition were, what his failure were, what the reasons for his failures were, then looking at what is the situation now and what we could define as a support for his project. Now, this opportunity could also be adjusted by taking some orientation testing in order to identify the right track for the student. And even if during the school year it would turn out that the chosen path isn't the right one, the school should be so flexible to allow the student to change his plan instead of waiting until the end of the school year when there's nothing else left to do than to acknowledge failure. So, in conclusion, if we don't want to become passive observers or even masters or managers of failures, then these 5 elements, Ethos, Pathos, Logos, combined with Telos and Kairos, are essential elements of a learning culture in our school, and they will be massive game changers in order to achieve academic progress for nearly everyone. Thank you.